My name is Matt Stohrer and I repair saxophones for a living. Today I would like to show you an SML, Strasser Marigot-Lemaire, Coleman Hawkins special. Now, Strasser Marigot-Lemaire was a French company that handmade saxophones from the 1930s through the 70s, I believe, maybe into the early 80s. And they're most commonly known for their gold medal and Revision D instruments. Now, the Revision D, that's not a official name. Someone who did a lot of research on them decided to break them down into four basic models: the Revision A, the Revision B, C, and D. And the Coleman Hawkins special, now Coleman Hawkins, you might know him as playing on a Selmer most of the time, and he did. He was actually under contract to play Selmer in the United States, but in Europe there was either a loophole or they didn't care or what, but Selmer didn't have him under contract to play in Europe, so he got a contract to play SMLs. And you ended up with the Coleman Hawkins special, with a really nice engraving of a hawk there. And apparently he did play these for a little while when he was in Europe, but not much. And that's because these were made during, and only during, World War II. So if you think of Paris in the early 1940s, and you think of what they're making there and what they're able to make and what's going on, it's just mind-boggling that they're able to make any. I mean, brass, steel. There was actually a law in the United States that nothing that was non-essential for the war could be made that contained more than 10% copper or steel, among other things. So the fact that they were able to make saxophones in Paris, this one was made in 1941, and this one was made in 1943. The fact that they were able to get them made at all is really astonishing. And something interesting you'll see on the Tenor Coleman Hawkins special here is that it has black pearls. And you see this on European-made saxophones, particularly Paris-made saxophones. During World War II, they were cut off from their normal supplies in French Tahiti of their mother of pearl. And I may be wrong about that source, but that's what I've read. But I know they were cut off from their normal supply of pearls and made do sometimes with bakelite and sometimes with this darker colored pearl here, which is just beautiful, and you'll see on some balanced actions and a few SMLs as well. So this Tenor Coleman Hawkins special is even specialer because it's got black pearls on it, which is just gorgeous. So the Coleman Hawkins special was made from about 1940 to 1945. Only a very few of them were made. You barely ever see them. I mean, these two represent 50% of the Coleman Hawkins specials I've ever seen. And there were two different types made. I've only seen the first type, and that's this type, which is patterned on the Revision A horns, which have, the easiest way you can tell is that they've got left-hand side bell keys. There's some that were made patterned after the Revision B, which has right-hand side bell keys. And I don't know about the differences between the two because I've only seen this type. So this is they're really fantastic instruments. And there's some instruments out there that are really rare and that you never see because people who own them never want to sell them. And the two that come to mind when I think about that are Selmer Jimmy Dorsey specials and then the SML Coleman Hawkins specials. No one I've ever known that had any would even consider selling them. So that might tell you something. As far as the instrument itself, it's built quite well, especially considering the era in which it was built. It's got some like semi-ribbed construction. You've got a lot of ribs. You've also got some single posts. You've got rolled tone holes, which are not very level. SML didn't really get their tone holes ever to be quite as level as Kahn did. Kahn in the 1930s had nearly totally level rolled tone holes most of the time, which is kind of amazing considering that these rolls are pulled out of the body and then rolled over. And just think about the forces required to do that to brass and not have it break. Being able to do that is kind of amazing. So the tone holes are a bit unlevel, which means you've got to do a bit of extra work with your pad work. I definitely remember this taking me a bit longer than usual. And you may have seen, I did a video on these like maybe 2 years ago when I was actually doing the work, and I just didn't have time to get the video done before they had to go home to their owner. So this is the first time I've seen them since then, and they're in for just a look-see and for me to use on the videos. So these were overhauled by me about 2 years ago. Oh, and you can also see there's number 177 on the engraving there. So at least by the time this one was made, they made 177 altos. And there's no such number on the tenor. I'm not sure what that means, but the tenor being the one that Coleman Hawkins played, you'd think that that would be the one that was like, you know, that they would have numbered or something, but maybe that was just because it was made in 43, by which time, you know, Paris belonged to the Nazis. So you've got rolled tone holes. You've got a relatively modern construction for the time they were built and who they were made by. You've got your bis and your G on separate pivot screws. The Octave Mechanism is somewhat antiquated, but it's not too difficult to get feeling well. If you've managed to do an old con, they're basically the same. This guy needs to be fit really well. There was some significant damage to this end of it. You can see the plating's been worn off that I had to repair, and this had also been crushed in down here, and I had to repair that. You're highly unlikely to ever see one of these, but if you do, the playing, they just have an absolutely bottomless tone. They are really, really fantastic to play. They're pretty comfortable under the fingers. They do feel, you know, I mean, you can see the left-hand pinky table is an old style. They feel a little, the pearls are a little bit small for my taste. They feel a little edgy. You know, you don't really feel like you can, there's not much room for error. You really have to have your fingers on the pearls, and they're a little bit spread compared to other horns of the era. So it's not the most comfortable horn, but it's still pretty darn good, and it only takes you a few minutes to warm up and start getting around on. It's got a front F, which is nice. Given the, you know, the period of time this was built and the design being a 1930s design, it feels and plays remarkably modern. The tone is just huge and bottomless and lush and dark, and there's so much power. Intonation is pretty darn good. There's a little bit of unevenness in the scale, but I think that that's really just sort of a design of the times issue. Getting that, you know, tonality to be even throughout the range was something that a lot of horn makers were working on a lot in the 1920s and 30s. The engraving is spectacular. Let's see if I can get you a good view of that. Really gorgeous. And the action is very light. The horns are fairly mouthpiece friendly, but a large chamber is definitely probably better than a small one. The common injury you see on SMLs, the pull down of the neck and then this being jammed into the neck, that had happened on this one. I had to resolder this a little bit. Hopefully you can't see it too much. Soldering on silver is not easy to make clean, especially after it's been crushed in. But this brace design looks really nice, but it's really not that great. They've got a very long neck, and people put their mouthpieces on the neck without supporting it and pull that down a lot, and you get a lot of crushes in here on SMLs, and that had already started back here. And that continues through, I think, for all of their horns. Both horns are pretty much the same design, keywork-wise. Not a whole lot of crazy special stuff to deal with other than just working with those unlevel tone holes. And the keywork was, especially on the tenor, I remember being a bit soft, but you know, that's good and bad. It's hard to make it so that it, you know, stays in adjustment if it gets knocked around at all, but it was very easy to do the mechanical work that this needed in order to have all of its keys be absolutely tight. And this one had been played a bit more. You can see there's a bit more wear on the bell engraving area. And those black pearls are just gorgeous, aren't they? Isn't that cool? But yeah, this is pretty much an SML revision A with some special tweaks. I'm not sure what exactly is different about it in the bore. I'm not sure anybody knows. It might just be the engraving. But I haven't played many of these, but every one that I've played has just been an astonishingly good saxophone, and these two were no exception. You can see the tenor likes fairly open key heights. The alto was a little more moderate, but still fairly open. And if you ever see one of these for sale, I mean, the values are kind of all over the place because no one ever sells them. You know, you see them for sale every once in a great while. And oddly enough, most of the ones I've seen came out of, I think, Sweden. I think 3 out of the 4 that I know of came out of Sweden somewhere. So, whatever that means. But yeah, that's the SML Coleman Hawkins special tenor and alto set that I overhauled just a couple years ago now. Yeah, really fantastic instruments, quite rare, beautiful, and a lot of fun to play. Pretty much the exact reason why I love my job so much is because I get to bring things like this back to life and then play them, you know, and get paid to do it, which is not bad at all, right? Well, my name is Matt Stohrer. I repair saxophones for a living. Hope you found this helpful, useful, informative, and interesting. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to get in touch. You can leave a comment here on Facebook. You can, or not on Facebook, here on YouTube. You can contact me through email. I've got my email and my phone number listed on my website, and if you call during the week during business hours, Eastern Standard Time, I will usually pick up the phone and talk to you about saxophone stuff. So, that's about it. Thanks for watching.